tô conseguindo ouvir. Será que é um problema? Ou é só meu?
Hi, you guys. Can you hear me now?
Hello, yes, thank you.
Okay, awesome. Um, so for today's session, well, first of all, my name is Kiran, and I am an Education USA intern in the United or from the United States. And right now, I am in Rio, in Brazil, and I'll be here for the next couple of weeks. I've been here for like 2 months already, and I love it. But for today, I am here to discuss standardized tests that students who wish to go to the United States, traditionally high schoolers, but can be anybody, would have to take in order to submit a college application to study in the United States. If you guys want to keep your cameras on, that's totally fine. If you want to keep them off, that's also fine. I will be recording this session to be placed onto YouTube. So if you guys miss any of the things that I'm saying right now, you can always go to Education USA Rio's YouTube channel and rewatch it. But for today, I'm just going to start off with two different presentations, one about the ACT, one about the SAT. If you haven't heard of it, I will describe what it is to you in the presentation, and then we'll talk about how to go about taking those tests and which one is right for you. And then I'll talk about a bit about my personal experience with taking both of these exams, because I took and studied for both, used them to apply for colleges, use it or with those scores. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen with the first presentation I have prepared for you guys today, and that would be with the ACT. And if at any point you guys can't see or hear anything that I'm saying, please say something. I think the mute button was not doing so well before, but now we got it figured out. So let's get started. Okay. So as I said before, if you guys are thinking about applying to the US for college, for undergraduate or for your bachelor's undergraduate degree, you will have to take, or it can be optional, but it's highly encouraged for you guys to take one of two standardized tests, either the SAT or the ACT. And this presentation is going to cover the ACT, and then later on I'll talk about the SAT. But for now, I'm just going to give you guys some general advice and strategies to help you improve your ACT score. Okay? Okay. So the ACT serves as a college and career readiness assessment. It's basically like any standardized test that you will have to take in Brazil. And that score that you take is kind of a measurement of who you are as a student, what your capabilities are, what your potential is. It has an exam that spans about 3.5 hours, and it has a scale from 1 to 36. I know that's very long, but it's okay. It's just one day, and you'll be totally fine for the rest of it. But this test comprises of 4 mandatory areas. So English, math, reading, and science. And I know English and reading might sound similar, but English is more like grammar and sentences and speaking, just proper grammar in general, English grammar. Reading is more like reading comprehension, where you read a passage and you have to understand what the passage is talking about, different themes, characters, things like that. So, like I said, the test recognizes academic achievement, so who you are as a student, but it does not measure your intelligence. So, any natural ability is not measured here. It's pretty much just based off of who can put in the work and who can prepare the most. And you will be rewarded if you work really hard, you're very disciplined, and you study as much as you can with materials designed to prepare you for the ACT. And you will have as high of a score as you possibly can take. It's not just based off of who's naturally born smart, which is great, which is why I like the ACT. So we're just going to talk about the structure. Basically, it's all multiple choice question types, which is different from the SAT, but I will get into that later. It's all multiple choice. So that means you have like 4 or 5 answer choices to choose from. So if there's like a question and then you have like 4 or 5 answer choices that you can choose from. So it's kind of easy, kind of not so easy, because the ACT kind of tries to trip you up by putting 2 very similar answers sometimes. But it's easy in the sense that you don't have to think of the answer on your own and write it down, which some people find to be harder. And like I said, the total time is about 3.5 hours, and there's only 1 break. But I promise you that time flies, especially when you're, so immersed in the test itself. I said before, the test is divided into 4 different sections, and it will always be given in a single order: English, math, reading, science, and then if you want, the writing test. It's optional, but you don't have to take it, but you can. And the writing test is basically where you are given a prompt and you answer that prompt in a certain amount of time. But again, it's optional. You really don't have to take it. Most people that I know did not take the writing test, and it did not affect their ability to apply to college whatsoever. I personally did, because I had studied for it, but if you don't feel comfortable in your abilities as like a writer under a certain amount of pressure, that's totally fine. You don't have to take it. Totally optional. Okay. So the ACT section, like I said before, this is more of a detailed breakdown of what they are. Like I said, it starts English, math, then there's a break, reading, science, and then the optional writing. The English test is 45 minutes, and there's 75 questions. And I know that seems like a lot of questions in a very little amount of time, but if you do study very hard with English grammar, then you're all good. You're totally good. You'll be fine. I finished personally my English test with, I think, about 15 minutes to spare. And I was able to check over my work and able to answer as many questions as I possibly could. So you guys will be fine as long as you study, which is, a lot of people are like, oh, this is hard because I have to study. But the thing is if you study, you will get a higher score. And it's easy as that. Moving on, the math test is 60 minutes and 60 questions, all multiple choice, which is different from the SAT, which has a few written in responses. And then there's a break, and then there's the reading test, 35 minutes, 40 questions. And then the science and reasoning test, which actually isn't a science test, it's really just a technical reasoning test where you look at data, look at graphs, it asks you a few questions here or there, and then you answer. And the writing test is 30 minutes. Optional, again, totally optional. So I'm just going to talk about, getting prepared the night before the ACT, a couple of days before and the night before. So a few days before, you should really start to feel your body. People say eat well, sleep well, drink a lot of water. I personally did that and was in bed by, a reasonable hour every day, a couple days before, not just the night before. And that really helped me with my focus and with my concentration in the day up. I personally used to let my TV run in the background when I slept, but I found that I couldn't get a good night's sleep when I did that. So I'd recommend, no music, no social media before bed, no TV. And you need at least 2 days prior a good night's sleep because your human body needs at least 48 hours to like reset its sleep cycle. And then you'll feel rested the day of. You won't be feeling tired from a couple of days before. As far as the day of goes, you might be really, really nervous. I know I was. But what I did was I ate a pretty well balanced meal, nothing too big where I'd have to like feel very tired afterwards or have to use the restroom a lot, but nothing too small where I get really hungry and that's all I'm thinking about the entire 3.5 hours. But what I would say is eat a balanced breakfast of protein and carbohydrates. I really like eggs and bread. And that was kind of my breakfast and lots of a bit of coffee to keep me up. That's I think if anybody likes coffee here, definitely drink some. It helps. Don't do anything different than you would normally do. If like I said up here, if you get up and work out every morning, do that. If you drink coffee every morning, do that. If you don't do any of that, don't begin the day of the test because you don't want to mess up your mental or your physical state of mind. And also, the day of, I'll get to this later, answer every question. Okay. So yeah, preparing the night before, things that you should bring that I brought personally, pencils, I brought like 10 different number 2 pencils, not mechanical pencils or pens. And if you look up the word number 2 pencil, it will show you what type of pencil I mean. Calculator, it can be any single type, just a calculator that you're used to so that you know where the buttons are, where the plus sign, the minus sign, the dividing, all of this stuff. So as long as you like bring or like know what calculator you're using, it doesn't matter what type of calculator you bring. Also, you should definitely have your identification and registration printed out. I brought 2 forms of ID, my school ID and my state or country ID. And I brought those to the testing site on the morning of, just in case like one of the identification cards didn't work. But definitely bring your registration, have it printed out, put it next to your bed so that you don't lose it or you don't forget it because it's going to be the thing that gets you into the exam. I would bring a wristwatch. Me personally, I forgot to, but it was fine. If you forget to, it's totally fine. They usually have clocks in the classrooms itself, and they usually have somebody telling you like what you should or like what you should keep in mind. Like saying, oh, you have 30 minutes left, or you have 15 minutes left. The proctor, the administrator of your exam, the person who watches over you, your supervisor, will keep you updated on timing. So don't freak out if you forget it, but I would bring it if you could. If you are testing in a time where it's a lot of sickness is around, if it's winter or something like that, I would bring tissues because the last thing you want is to be coughing and sneezing and blowing your nose, all the snot coming out, and that's all you're focusing on. You want to be able to get it done and move on from it. And the other things that I would bring is cough drops because I know that whenever I get nervous, my throat gets really parched and I feel like I need to drink a lot of water, but you don't want to drink a lot of water because then you'll go to the bathroom a lot and you don't want to take away time from your test. And I'd bring a small snack. Like I said, there's a 10 to 15 minute break. And during that time, you would want to bring something to eat, something to keep you going, something small. I brought a banana. You could bring whatever you want. And a water bottle because they probably will not bring or give you any sort of water bottles there. And you're going to want to stay hydrated throughout. You're not going to want to go 4 hours without water in a very anxious environment, you know? Okay. Okay. So preparing the day of a little bit more. Okay. Preparing the day of Saturday morning, that morning itself, what I did was I woke up early and I had a shower because that is my normal morning routine. I wore very comfortable casual clothing. So like sweatpants and a hoodie, nothing super comfortable because you don't want to fall asleep. So don't bring a blanket or anything like that. But don't wear jeans because you're going to be sitting there for for 4 hours and that's going to dig into you. It's not going to be fun. Definitely bring a jacket because classrooms for the ACT, no matter where you are in the world, will somehow always be very cold. And you're not going to want to have to think about it. So yeah, anyway, again, eat a healthy, substantial breakfast. As a rule, protein is better than sugar. So don't eat, I don't know, a donut for breakfast if you can have eggs. Also, just don't eat donuts for breakfast in general all the time. It's not that great for you. But yeah, anyway, 30 minutes earlier than the test time, you should be at your test site so that you can have time to find a seat, find your room, locate any sort of, if you forget something, you have time to go back and pick it up, or if you have problems with your registration, you can get it fixed before the test starts, because once the test starts, they don't let you in. And I would hate if any of you guys came there only like 2 minutes late, but they wouldn't let you take the test because of the regulations and the rules that the ACT has in place. So yeah, anyways, overall tips, transitioning away from like what you should do the day of. Overall tips, I would say read the directions before the test date. I would highly recommend taking some practice exams on your own at home. And those practice exams will have the exact directions that you will have to read on the test day for each of the sections. And if you kind of have an understanding and you've memorized all of the directions before the test date, nothing that is said on the test date with the directions will surprise you. You won't be thrown off. You won't be anxious. You won't be like, what is this? I don't know what's happening. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. As long as you do this practice test and you really kind of understand what is being asked of you. Another thing is pace yourself. The announcement is only made when it's 5 minutes before the end of the test, which is why I say like you should have your own wristwatch, unless, I mean, you don't want to take the chance that the classroom that you're in doesn't have or has a clock. Mine luckily did, but I know some of my friends who also took the ACT, they forgot wristwatches and didn't have a clock in their classroom. Some administrators will sometimes say like, okay, we're having a break now, or like we'll have a break at this time, we'll have a break at that time, or something like that. But you should really bring your own clock to kind of keep yourself on track. I would read your questions carefully. Definitely annotate, definitely write in your notebook that you're given, because you're given an answer sheet and a test book. So in that test book, nothing is graded, but your answer sheet is graded with all the multiple choice. Definitely understand the questions, because if you don't, then you'll answer a question and not actually understand what you're writing down or what you're answering. I would say answer the easy questions first. So as you do more and more practice, you'll start to realize what types of questions you really do well in, and things like that. Answer every question to the ACT. There is no penalty for guessing. If you guess and you get it wrong, you don't lose points. You just don't get the point. Definitely be precise in marking your answer, and don't make notes on the answer sheet. So what I mean by that is there's a bunch of bubbles that you fill in for multiple choice. And if you fill in a couple bubbles and smudge over to the rest of them, the grid reader is not going to know which actual answer you wanted to put down. And that entire question will be marked wrong, which will be very unfair if especially you cannot, or like you had the right answer, they just marked you as wrong. Anyway, if you do practice exams, I would highly recommend practicing bubbling in or answering your questions on the answer sheet, because there's a certain format to it, certain layout, certain design. And it will show you an example of a good fill in, and then an example of a bad one, so that you can know what to do and what not to do on test day. Don't panic. Definitely use the entire time to work. When I took the ACT, a lot of people, when they were finished, just closed their books and put their head down to sleep. I would recommend, at least if you have extra time or you don't know an answer, spend as much time as you can trying to figure out what the answer is. or if you've answered every question and you feel good about it, go back through and check your work. It never hurts to do an extra double check. Yeah? Okay. Moving on. So more answering strategies. Answer all the questions that you are sure about first. So as you do more practice with each of the questions, you're gonna find, like I said, you're gonna find out which types of questions are easy. And even if there's no pattern to what you find easy, if you say there's a reading section, if you read a passage and then you look at the questions and there's let's say 5 questions on a certain page, and you're able to answer 4 of those, but there's one that kind of makes you think and stay on it for a little longer than the rest of them, skip it and move on, and then answer the other ones that are easy to answer next. And then once you've completed the majority of the test, the questions that are left are the ones that you're a little unsure about. That is when you go a second time through the test and try and answer those questions. And if you still don't have any idea what to do after, the first time and then the second time, you still have no idea what to do, guess. One strategy that I used was picking a specific letter. My letter was C. And if I genuinely had no idea which letter the question that I had no idea about was, what the answer was, I would pick the answer choice C. But I do not advocate for that until you have gone through twice and made sure that you really don't know what the question is asking or any of the answers. Because you want to try as hard as you can and give yourself a chance to have the highest score. And if you use this guessing strategy, you may or may not do well with it. So like I said, first try, answer every question you can as easily and quickly as possible. By answering every question of which you're sure, you can rest and be calm, knowing that you answered every question that you could with the best of your ability. And then the second try, you can definitely go back to those questions that you skipped over in the first pass and ask yourself, what questions would I want to do now? Does this seem like something I want to spend my time on? Of the several that you skipped, there will be some that you're able to answer with just a few more seconds of thinking. And then there's some that you genuinely have no idea what to do. And in that case, that's when you guess after you've done your second try. That's what I just said. Okay, process of elimination. So one of the testing strategies that I used was process of elimination. If I genuinely had no idea what answer this question, what the answer to this question, a certain question was, I would use process of elimination because it helps you narrow down your choices. Basically, what process of elimination is say you have a question and then the answer choice is A, B, C, D, E. What you would do is you would read the question and then you'd go, okay, it's definitely not A, it's definitely not B, it's definitely not C, but I'm not sure if it's D or E. So by using process of elimination, I've detected the incorrect answers much faster than the correct ones, and it works in my interest to disregard them because now I feel a lot more comfortable since I'm left with only 2 answer choices, D and E. Then my choice becomes a lot easier and I feel a lot less anxious about choosing the complete wrong answer. Even if I do get it wrong, I'll know that my thought process was correct. Another strategy, leave nothing blank. If you leave something blank, you are risking not getting that answer correct because you are not penalized on the ACT for an incorrect answer. So it is okay to guess because you have a 1 in 5 chance or 1 in 4 chance of getting the correct answer and doing well. And you can also use process of elimination to help you not leave anything blank. If you genuinely have no idea where to start, you can use process of elimination. And if nothing else, like I said, pick one letter and stick to it. Mine was C, yours could be B, D, doesn't matter. So moving on to the sections themselves, the ACT English section is the one that I said was more about grammar. So it's 75 multiple choice questions with 45 minutes each, or for the section itself. and it's about 36 seconds per question. Now, you don't use the 36 seconds for each question. You sometimes only use like 5 for one question, meaning that you have an entire like minute for another question. Don't freak out because I know 36 seconds is not a lot, but I promise you, like I said before, the more practice you do, the more work you do upfront with practice exams, the materials, with, you know, attending webinars like this and stuff, so you have a good idea. The more that you do, the better you will get at answering the questions as fast as you can. The focus encompasses aspects like sentence structure, grammar and usage, punctuation, and rhetorical skills. I know that those might sound like very broad, abstract concepts, but I promise you they're really not that difficult. Anyways, moving on, beyond merely assessing like grammar regulations, the English section of the ACT is very big on punctuation mistakes. So sometimes it will ask you about what you think about a comma, what you think about a period here, what you think about a semicolon, things like that. So definitely besides like grammar, spelling, and, you know, words, certain synonyms and words, you want to study punctuation as well. Some guidelines I've listed here are like when you're dealing with a series of 3 or more items, insert a comma before and, or yeah, before the conjunction and then put the rest of the phrase. That's just one example. If you would like, you can access these PowerPoints and this video recording later to look at the other noteworthy guidelines, but for time's sake, I'm just gonna keep moving. Anyways, okay. One second. Oh, so here I'm just talking about approaching passage review. So what I mean by that is there's a section of passages and then there's questions for the ACT English section. Basically, what I would do is I would read the passages that I was given in only like a minute and a half, and then I would kind of annotate, make notes. Wherever I saw that there was a grammar mistake, I would kind of make a little note of it so that I could keep that in mind. And then I would have a priority order for answering, addressing diction and grammar questions as they tend to be the swiftest to respond to. Something else that I would do is an auditory detection technique, which sounds very, very pompous, very pretentious, but I promise you it's not. It's basically just saying that when you're looking at the answer choices, kind of think about what they're saying, how they're saying it, what they would sound like. I would mutter under my breath. I would just talk very softly, whisper under my breath, things that, or the answer choices that I was being presented so that I could see if something sounded okay or not. And another thing that I would say is like really look at all the responses and all the answers that you're given, because a lot of them are, like I said, the ACT tries to trip you up. And if you catch certain details that are different, then you can see the difference between between A and B and C and D. And if you do that, then you'll have a better chance of understanding what the correct answer is. Also, there is a no change option at the end of the English section. There's like A, B, C, and D, and then E is like no change, or A, B, C, D is no change, something like that. A quarter of the time of those several questions that you have here, 25% of the time, no change is an option. So sometimes a question will be like, hey, would this sentence make sense if you put this word in? Or like, what word would make sense if you put this word into this sentence? And the first couple of answer choices will have a certain word, a synonym, or something like that. And then the last answer choice will be like no change. And sometimes you don't have to change. Like they're trying to trip you up. Like I said, they're trying to trick you and make you think that you have to change the sentence, but you really don't. So for the ACT math section, there is 60 multiple choice questions in 60 minutes. So you get 1 minute per question, which I know sounds very little, but it actually isn't. It's that's quite long, because the questions are quite easy. They deal primarily in middle and high school math. The problem with the ACT math section is even though the content is measured for, kids in high school who have already gone through middle and high school, the timing can mess people up and get them very stressed and overwhelmed. So the key is to breathe and really just sit down and answer each question as it comes. Don't worry about the ending result. Just take it as you will. Like I said, 60 questions, 60 minutes. Here is a breakdown of the types of topics that are covered in math question section. You can take a look at these later in the recording, but some ACT math strategies that I used for myself is definitely master the skill of estimation. Estimation is huge in being able to understand and answer questions as quickly as possible. Like I said, it will boost your efficacy and your efficiency and your accuracy as well. I know that you'll have a calculator, but it's a little difficult to bring out a calculator for everything. It's time consuming, and those are precious seconds that you could use on a harder question later on. The next thing, like I said, is acquire calculator proficiency. If you don't know the buttons on your calculator and how it works, like I said before, you will waste your time. If you bring a calculator that you've never used before, just open, brand new out of the package, you don't know how it works, you will have to spend a lot of time understanding how it works. But if you bring something that you've been using for the last couple of weeks, last couple of months, maybe only for ACT practice, then you'll be in the mindset that you know what you're doing, you're good, you're fine. Anyway, the strategic elimination of options, basically, it's the process of elimination. That's what I used in math as well. If there was like a huge number and the question dealt with very small numbers, then I would know that that question was, or that answer choice was incorrect, and I just completely get rid of it. So the next thing that I would like to talk about is meticulous question analysis. Really understand what the question is asking you. Because if the question is asking you about a certain topic, but you read it as understand, or like asking you about another topic, or you misread a certain number, if you misread the number, say like 10 for 100, then you'll have the entire answer choice be altered by that amount, by 100, like by 90 or whatever is being asked of you, by like 10 times the amount. And you really don't, if you understand the concept, that's going to kind of feel like a slap in the face that you understood what you were doing, you just misread the question. So yeah, I would really highly recommend that you understand and make sure you understand the question before you answer it with your own answer choices. So if there is no diagram, what I would do is I would kind of draw out a tiny little thing on little annotation, little notes to the side, just to illustrate what the problem was asking me. Or I would write out like certain key figures, key numbers that it's asking me as well, just so that I can keep track of it in my head. Also, translation comprehension. If you do enough practice, you will see like what I mean by this, but there are different interpretations of the word, like of for multiplication and per for division. And that's a very like English way of saying division or multiplication. Really, really understand what those words mean and what they're asking of you in your practice exam, so that the day of, when you see those words, you won't wonder, like, are they asking for multiplication, division, addition, subtraction? I'm not sure. You'll know if you do enough practice based off of like how you do on your practice exams, how you do on your practice exercises, prep courses, things like that. Also memorize essential formulas. If there's tons of resources online, but also in preparation materials where you should memorize like area and perimeter formulas for triangles, rectangles, and circles, because even if you are given that on a formula sheet, you should know just to save time, just to know like what figures you should use, what numbers you should use, things like that. And also alternate representation utilization. So what I mean by that is sometimes fractions can be represented as decimals. Sometimes decimals can be represented as percentages. make sure you know that they are all pretty much the same. They're just in different forms, and you have to know how to convert to each form. So for example, if I say like 98%, if they ask for that in decimals, it's 0.98. Yeah? Okay, cool. Also, when you are faced in a with a problem that asks you about a lot of variables, try and plug in like very small numbers, like 2 or 5 or something like that, just so that you know what the approximate answer should be. And you will see those types of questions a lot in your ACT practice if you choose to do ACT prep courses. And you can read the rest of these later, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to keep going. ACT reading, it is a 40 multiple choice question section with 35-minute window. I would say you should have about 8 to 10 minutes per passage. And there's 4 different types. There's prose fiction, which is just, fiction. Social sciences, which talks about things like public policy and like politics, history, international relations, things like that. Humanities, which is things like arts and culture, so like Shakespeare or dancing or music, stuff like that. And natural science, which is really, really, really straightforward, and it's considered the easiest. In my opinion, it was easy for me, but it's typically considered the easiest section because it is nonfiction and you are able to just read it and understand exactly what you're doing, especially if you're, STEM oriented. Definitely easy. More test strategies. This is quite similar to math, but we can still talk about like a few new ones that may come up with the reading specifically. I will say that there are a lot of if you look at the third tip that I have, there's a lot of distractors. Like I said, the ACT tries to trip you up. There's a lot of answer choices that are built to trap people, which is why I say really ask yourself if you understand the question in full, because then you will answer the question properly and you won't just answer the question that you have in your own head. Also, I would say that the way that I approached the reading section is I read the passage first, underlined or annotated or made notes of anything important that I thought, and then I would answer the questions afterwards. A lot of people try and do the questions, like they read it first and they do the answer, then they read the passage and then they read the questions again and try and answer them. But in my opinion, in my personal experience and in my classmates' personal experiences as well, reading the passage first and then transitioning over into the questions, much, much easier. Something else that I will say is if a question refers to like a specific line in the passage, definitely make sure that those are kind of the easiest questions in my opinion, for me personally. For example, if you do your ACT prep, what you can do is like, it will say like in line 43, can you do this? Like in line 43, look at the question or like look at what is said already. What do you think of it or something like that? Very easy to just go to the passage, figure out what you're saying and figure out what's being asked of you, and then you can answer those questions. Moving on to the ACT science section, a lot of people are quite scared of this section when they first hear about it because some of them don't consider themselves very science oriented. I know I wasn't. But if you talk about the science reasoning section as the technical reasoning section, it's much, much easier. And what do I mean by technical? I mean, like you will be provided a lot of charts and graphs, and you'll be asked very simple questions based on those charts and graphs and figures that you're given. So for example, if you're given a bar graph and it asks you what is being compared on this bar graph, you would just look at the X and the Y axis, see if there's any answer choices that correspond to those two subjects, and you'll be good. Those are easy. The other thing I want to consider is the opposites principle. In the science section, sometimes there are two answer choices that stand directly in opposition to each other. So like, for example, if I say like, what color is the apple? And then there's one that's like, the apple is red, and then the apple is blue. Those are two completely opposite question answers. And one of them is more likely to be correct because, like I said, the ACT wants to trip you up. And if you understand these traps, you will be able to understand which answer is best fit for the question. This is a detailed breakdown of the ACT science section. You can go back and look at it in the PowerPoint, but I'm just going to move on for now as far as timing is concerned. I will also say that these are pretty important to read through, but it's not unlike anything I've said before with the reading and the math sections, except for the last bullet point, which is efficient data interpretation. So it might be very, very like overwhelming when you are looking at a lot of charts and graphs and all of this stuff, trying to look at labels and trends and stuff. But if you can seek correlations among multiple data presentations, you will be fine on the ACT science section completely. And all it takes is practice. I promise you, there's not any person in this world who is born knowing how to read any of these charts and like understanding them. It really just takes some practice. The good thing I like about the ACT and the SAT as well is as long as you are working diligently every single time that you have free time towards this goal, you will score high, guaranteed. And these are some of my references for this PowerPoint. Does anybody right now have any questions as far as what I've said so far? And if not, then you can always go back and see what I have written and what I have in the prep PowerPoint. So I'm just going to move on to the SAT PowerPoint now. It's much shorter because we've already covered a lot. And I know it's very overwhelming. Some of you might be like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. But don't worry, this will be done very soon. And I can take as many questions as you guys would like. So this is the SAT prep PowerPoint that I have. Basically the same thing that I said, memorize your test directions. During practice tests, definitely read over the directions so that on test day, you're not freaking out if somebody asks you, or like if you read the test directions and you're like, oh my gosh, I've never done that before, I don't know what that's saying. You don't want that to happen to you, trust me. So for your sake, when you're doing your practice test, read the test directions, memorize them. And the next thing that I would like to talk about is the answer sheet. So what's different about the SAT from the ACT is that in the math section, there is fill in the blank responses. So with the ACT during the math section, it's just multiple choice. So you have as many questions as possible, like there's many answers that you can choose, and you won't have to like write in any of them. They don't have to come from your brain. They're already printed on the sheet. But in the SAT, there's a couple of answer choices there that you, or there's a couple of questions there on the answer sheet that are left completely blank, and it's entirely up to you how you fill those in. There's usually only like 2 from my understanding, at least when I took the test. Structure could have changed, but as far as I know, that is the only place that you have to do. But there's only a couple at the end of the math section of the SAT. As far as pacing goes, ACT is very randomized, but the SAT definitely follows a, like, when you start off your questions, they're easy, and when they end, they're the hardest, except for the reading. Reading is completely random, just like the ACT. And it's advisable that you really spend more time on the easy questions and figure those out as fast as you possibly can, and then move on. Like I said before, you definitely want to like see which one is correct, see which one, like to see which question you can answer very easily on the first try. And if you are kind of, struggling to answer a question super quickly, then skip it, move on. Think about if you can come back to it and answer it, or if you just don't really want to talk or think about it at all and you would prefer to focus on other things that you can accomplish. Totally fine. Either way, you won't lose a point. In the new SAT, in my day, when I answered a question incorrectly, I would get 1/4 point off. But now that, there's a new version out there, since I've taken it about I think 4 years ago, I can't remember, I'm really old. Now that I've taken it, or now that you guys have a new version, you can answer as many questions as you want. You can guess. The same strategies that I've used for the ACT are applicable here as well. That's awesome. The typical score is about 1,000. And that's just like kind of what you think about when you think about the SAT and just like the score range. Like I said, guessing, no penalty for it. You should only guess though when you can eliminate as accurately as possible down to one answer, just like what I said, the process of elimination. There is a math quantitative comparison and math grading questions. So there are 2 questions at the end of the math section. There is no penalty for having wrong responses in that section, just like there's no penalty anywhere else. But it is free response and it has to come from your brain. Yeah? Okay. This is kind of just general knowledge about what you should do for reading, the reading section, because the SAT reading is like ACT English and ACT reading combined into this. So this is something that I think you guys should look over later. But for now, I'm going to move on just for time's sake. And this is also interesting to look at. So, okay, critical reading, something that is really important is the passages can be super short, but they can also be quite long. And they're meant to be very difficult and challenging. They are US college level reading difficulty. But there are several different questions that you can expect to include, and I've listed them all here. And if you understand the patterns and the types of questions that you are asked, I promise you that these, no matter how short or how long or what type of question you're asked, you will know how to answer it. So I encourage you to go back through this recording, maybe take a picture of this right now if you'd like, or you can, access the PowerPoint on EducationUSA Rio's website as well, because this is a super good resource if you really just want to know like basics of SAT. Anyways, overall, for the reading section at least, you should definitely approach each passage with as much consideration as possible. Don't, like I told you guys to take some notes, like when you're reading it for the first time, take a few notes, but don't take all the notes in the world. Don't rewrite the passage because you don't want to spend that much time on reading as you do answering. You kind of want to have an equal balance. Definitely, some people like going through the questions before the reading section. In my personal experience, I found that I went faster when I read the passage first and then then it started answering the questions. But you can also consider looking at the questions before, because I had a lot of classmates who were able to get done faster sooner, get done faster with this type of strategy. Anyways, when answering the questions, something that a lot of people should consider is that you really should base your responses on the information in the passage itself, which is why I say you should read the passage first so that you know what the topic is. Do not bring your prior knowledge to the subject or to the question of the subject to the question, because the SAT is measuring how well you can comprehend passages that they provide you, not your intelligence beforehand and anything like that. Okay. Also, this is just kind of a general piece of advice, but definitely carefully read and answer all answer choices. Some answer choices may include true statements, but might directly address the questions asked. Definitely be aware that certain answers may be partially correct, but you should choose the one that best fits the question. That will be in the test directions. It will say choose the answer choice that is best fitted for the question. That doesn't mean it's completely correct, but it has to be better than the other questions. Remember that in the critical reading section, these questions are not organized by difficulty. Don't assume that if you answer all of the beginning questions, that those are the easiest and that the ending ones are hard. That's only for math and the other sections as well. But for reading, it is not. Definitely avoid guessing answers when possible, but since you are not penalized, it's okay if you need to, using the strategies that I talked about before. This is very similar to the ACT prep that I told you to do the night before, a couple of days before. Definitely get a good night's sleep. All of these things, test ignition ticket, pencils, water, snack, calculator, identification, all of that stuff. definitely eat eggs. Do not eat very sugary food for breakfast. Give yourself some time to go to the test center. Nothing's changed. And here in this spreadsheet, I have actually created an entire standardized test form for test dates, times, and locations in 2023 in HEAL, specifically. So if you guys want to take a look at that, definitely address or look at the PowerPoint prep or the prep PowerPoint that the Education USA is going to paste into their website. And from there, we can all kind of get a good idea. You guys can get a good idea of, if you want to take it this year, what your options are. And now I'm going to kind of talk about whether or not you should take the ACT or the SAT. Very simply put, I took both. I preferred the ACT more than the SAT. I actually spent a lot more time studying for the SAT than I did the ACT. And I performed a lot better on the ACT. Why I say this is because there are certain types of students who thrive in certain types of tests. So if you prefer a more fast-paced, generally lower difficulty level question, and it's a very like it's very predictable what's going to come at you. It's not very there's trick questions, but it's not like you kind of know when to spot the trick questions. I would say go for the ACT. And if you struggle a lot with critical reading comprehension, there are less questions in total on critical reading than there are in the SAT. But you will have to take the science test. If you're more inclined, if you're more, data, graph, figure understanding, figure reading, figure analysis, data analysis, things like that. If you're more inclined to that, I would take the ACT. This handout will also be pasted on the Education USA website. So you guys, if you want, you can take a picture. But I will have it uploaded to the website as soon as this webinar is over or very soon after. I personally really like the ACT just because I'm somebody who doesn't like to sit on a question that's very long. ACT has very shortly worded questions, very fast-paced, like I said. SAT is more lengthy, but for some people who love to read and who love to analyze words, this will be the easier, more tailored to your brain type. I have a lot of international student friends back in my university, University of Chicago, and a lot of them took the ACT and a very few amount took the SAT, but I heard good things about both. So it's not that international kids only take the ACT, but it's that sometimes one test is more readily available in one area than it is the other. So some people have like the SAT only in their state or in their city. Some people only have the ACT in their state or their city. Sometimes it's cheaper one way or the other. Sometimes you get scholarships for one way or the other. It really doesn't matter which one you take at the end of the day. Just maybe take it, and that you understand which one fits your needs most. If you read this handout, you'll get a really good idea of like what you're in for in regards to the SAT versus the ACT. And then you can decide which one you think would be best for you. So at this point, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but I really hope that you guys enjoyed this presentation. I hope it wasn't too overwhelming. I know that it was a lot of information that I threw at you guys, but I promise that thank you, Liliana. Thank you, Mateos. I think that I'm happy that you guys stayed. And this will be uploaded to Education USA's YouTube channel if you guys ever need to reference it again. But also all the materials that I talked about will be on the Education USA's website as well. The 2 PowerPoints and the handout. If you guys are interested in taking these, I highly recommend. Definitely do your research on looking at what I provided you, seeing which one you like the most. And yeah, I hope you guys have a good luck in the college application process. If you're doing it this year, if you're doing next year, good luck in preparing for that. Thank you for attending, and yeah, I'm gonna stop recording now.